in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
I keep an active correspondence with prisoners in the state slave camps. There are at least about a dozen in Tennessee slave camps where slavery is allowed. Chattel slavery is forbidden in Tennessee, but the state does have provision for it to maintain slavery. His name is Grenda Harmer. As I said, his name sounds like it comes from a William Faulkner novel, and it's about the staff at Morgan County Correctional Complex are deliberately harassing him. He says in a cell change request, he says, at 8:40 a.m., I just felt the heat come on. At 12:25 p.m., the heat was cut off. Now cold air is being intentionally pumped into my cell. This is being done, he says, because I'm exposing Morgan County Correctional Complex prison officials and staff with wrongdoing. The heat should have been turned on around November 20th at the latest. I got this in the mail yesterday. He says, I'd appreciate any help that you can give to me to stop this harassing. I'm not going to stop putting paperwork on MCCX wrongdoing. That's what he does. I'm his publisher, effectively, and he is my correspondent. His name is Grenda Harmer. Now, the question I have for you, my listener, is are prisons okay because they're there? In other words, are prisons normative because they exist and they are outside of your sense of right and wrong? Are prisons okay because they exist? Or are they, as some Christian authors that I've followed, some free market authors whom I've read, say they are ungodly, they are anti-Christian, and they are really servants of the modern progressive state? We have with us Brent Allen Winters, who is an attorney of longstanding and an expert in the common law. You can find out about him this morning at Nooganomics.com. I've posted some of his quotes at our sponsor website, Nooganomics.com. And he is his website is commonlawyer.com. Brent, are prisons part of the prisons are part of our moral and political life today because we live under statutes such as Tennessee Code Annotated. Why do we have prisons, and what is the alternative in the common law perspective? What is the common law perspective on prisons such as the one Grenda Harmer is in, Brent Allen Winters?
Well, we in America, when we, for the first 50, 60 years, across the board, did not allow police officers, constables to carry weapons. That's part of our common law tradition. It came from the old country. And at the same time, we didn't allow government to lock people up in punishment of crime because the only true lawgiver never authorized such a thing. You can go to the laws of nature, and the laws of nature is God. The laws of nature are written in the nature of things, and the laws of nature is God written in the Bible. Our common law is the law unwritten, lex non scripta. The Bible is the law written. William Blackstone goes over that in his first volume of his Laws of England. Commentaries are called the common law. And you won't find any place there where prisons are used for punishment of crime. Now, you will find places where men are put, as the old translations say, in ward. They're held until they're tried. And that, of course, is part of our common law tradition. Men don't always get bail, but bail better be available, and it better be liberally granted. But we don't have prisons we didn't because it was part of our common law tradition. Then, about the year, early in the 18th century, this idea came up, and it's worldwide now, but it came out of Pennsylvania, and it came out of a faulty view of the fundamental nature of man by a religious sect known as the Quakers. And the Quakers believed, and still do, they call themselves different names today, the Friends. They believe that there's a spark of goodness in every man. They call themselves the Friends, because they think we can all be friends. There's a spark of goodness in every man, they say, and all you need to do with a man that's committed a crime, is convicted, is lock him in a room with a Bible and tell him to read the Bible and pray, and when he comes out, I'm not exaggerating what they said, when he comes out, he'll be a reformed man. Well, they called those places where they locked men up to do that in Pennsylvania, they called them places of penance. And they came to call them then penitentiaries, places of penance. And this penitentiary idea grew into what we call now, and we use the same ideas with different words. We call them correctional facilities. We used to call them penitentiaries. We did that when I was young. I remember people talked about penitentiaries. That was the old word from the Bible, the old word from the Roman Latin Bible, as a matter of fact. It was not true to the Greek text. There is no penance in the Bible. That was Jerome's mistake. The Reformers noticed that in Jerome's translation into Latin from the Greek. But the Quakers continued with it. Penitentiaries became widespread in Pennsylvania, and even Alex de Tocqueville, which the Frenchman is quoted as by conservatives as being such a great guy to notice such great things about America. But what they don't say is Alex de Tocqueville was sent here by the government of France to investigate the penitentiary system in Pennsylvania to see if he wanted to take it back to France, and he did. He did, and now it's worldwide, and now it's all over the country, and we call them correctional facilities, but I can tell you for a fact, there's no correction going on. The people there don't care about correction. The people that run the places don't care about correction. They care about getting more money, and the more correctional programs they can run in the prisons of Tennessee, the more money they get, but they really don't run them. They just say they run them in many cases. I know how it goes. This is the way bureaucracy works. And men that are there don't give a hoot about such things. That's what penitentiaries are. There are other ways to deal with crimes. Restitution is the primary way that, and the Bible talks about. If things are stolen, they are to be restored. But if the government takes over the case, makes it a crime, it's not dealt with privately between men, then there is no restitution. The only restitution is we're going to put you in prison and we're going to make you suffer. We're going to take you away from your wife and children. So they're going to suffer. Can you imagine? Well, I'm sure you can, David. We talk about prisoners suffering, and they do. But their wives and their children, that's a life sentence, not only for the man that goes to prison. He never gets over that. He's marked. But then his wife and children are bereft of him. If there's anything the laws of nature's God, the maker of heaven and earth, requires, is that we give special consideration to widows and fatherless children. Why? Because widows, they're not really widows. That's not a good translation of the Hebrew word in the Older Testament. It doesn't mean widow. A widow is a woman who doesn't have a husband for whatever reason, but husbandless. That's what the word really means. And the fatherless child and the husbandless woman have something in common. They don't have the male in their life. And that's what they need, of course. A male needs that. The woman also understands that. But the male is the key to access, meaningful access, to the covenant of God, the trust settlement with our grandpa Adam that has come down to us. And the woman that doesn't have a husband, that's taken to prison, listen, these people are sending men to prison without justifiable cause under the laws of nature's God, under our common law. They are troubling husbandless. They're making women husbandless. And they're going to pay the price for it.
They're also,
but in the meantime, the rest of us suffer. David, go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying, also you are foreshortening and preventing restitution. If the prison system doesn't care about restitution, the state prosecutes cases in its own name as if it were the offended party. It's not doing it ex rel on behalf of the survivor of the crime or the victim, but it has its satisfaction in putting you away in a tax subsidized agency that it runs. And then saying, well, this man is paying a debt to society, forgetting entirely the victim. You know, the scripture, I think, and also the common law confirm this if I'm right. The common law insists on victims' rights. Brent Allen Winters.
Yes. Well, no question. I had a fellow come to me recently, and a bank had stolen his property. Long, ugly story. And he said, I want to talk to the prosecutor about this. I said, well, now, wait a minute. If we talk to the prosecutor about this, as the government employee, if they get hold of it, you're not going to get anything. If anybody gets anything, they're going to get it. You're not going to get it. And that's even more so true with the federal government. If they get involved in those cases, often that's what happens because it's a federally insured institution, whatever that means. But it's important that people seek private remedies if they want to be made whole, if they want restitution, if they want to get back to the, as you said a while ago, the status quo ante, the way they were before all their property was stolen or their injury was done. If you get the government involved, and here's the danger in all of this, in the big picture. People say, oh, I'm just going to call the government. You're in Chattanooga, and let's say you're within the city limits, and let's say that you want to have a cookout in your backyard, and let's say that you get the wood piled up and you light the fire and the neighbor hates you for whatever reason. So he calls the city officials to come down and make it, you stop burning that fire. He thinks it's a danger. Maybe he thinks sparks are coming onto his. I don't know what he thinks, but it's easy. It doesn't cost C to call a government bureaucrat and have him come out and use him as a hammer on your neighbor. That doesn't cost, but it doesn't really get to the problem. If you've really been injured, then you've got a problem. You need to go into court, and you'll get your money back. You'll get restitution. You'll get justice will be done. Get a jury. God says this, and it's true of our common law also. Good process, follow due process, trial by jury, do all the things that are supposed to be done. We'll trust the result. It's not your judgment, it's mine, says God, if you follow due process. And if we do follow due process, and that's done due process, and that's done in the courts, and the cult and the bureaucrat, all that does is they'll write it down and say, well, we had this many calls this year, we need more money next year. And then they'll get more tax dollars out of you, and they'll fret you even more. And by the way, if you call in Chattanooga, you call the government bureaucrat, here's the way it works. I've watched this over and over again. You call the government bureaucrat on your neighbor, and the government bureaucrat will begin looking at you. If you call the IRS on your neighbor, the IRS will immediately begin looking at you. They don't care. They want to get anybody they can get, and they know you're a scoundrel if you call the government on your neighbor, and so they're going to start watching you. That's the way it works in real life.
This is David Tulis. We're talking with Brent Allen Winters, an attorney. He runs commonlawyer.com. You can find out a little bit more about him at Nooganomics.com. I have some of his quotes making a distinction between common law and statutory law. You think that that's just a boring topic, but this is David Tulis, and I assure you it's of vital importance to understand the difference, because if we want a stronger local economy here in Chattanooga and in Hamilton County in the future and in Southeast Tennessee, let's think of the post-U.S. legal structure, right? That we have. We're talking about common law, which was common back in the 1800s and early 1900s. We've lost a lot of that, a lot of those privileges and, well, the blessings of common law. And now we live under a statute, and Brent Allen Winters is explaining how that works and why it really has to work that way. Now, we're mentioning, Brent, the idea of prisons and how, well, the existence of prisons, they are not normative just because they're there. And many people are put into prison after being convicted, but the prosecutor and the judge in their case has not followed through on an essential element of a crime, and that is called mens rea. In Tennessee, Brent, we have a statute in Title 39 that's called the requirement of culpable mental state. And it says that every criminal matter has to prove that there's a guilty mind when the person committed the crime. He intended to bring the results that he knew were illegal and wrong and unlawful. In other words, he knew what he was doing. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't an accident that he violated the statute. It was intentional, a culpable mental state, a conscious objective or desire to engage in the conduct or cause the result. Now, that statute is roundly ignored by our courts. Here we have Tom Greenholz, Don Poole, and Barry Steelman in Hamilton County that let the prosecutor buy and the officer buy on this point. And we have an engorged jail here. What is mens rea? Why is that a common law requirement? And how would it be if it were enforced in Chattanooga, Brent Allen Winters? How would our legal system be different?
Well, mens rea, it's a Latin word, one of those pesky Latin words that come down in our legal tradition. It means guilty mind. Guilty mind. And if you don't have a guilty mind, the common law, if you don't have a guilty mind when you do the actus reus, that means the guilty act. If you don't have a guilty mind when you do the act that's called a crime, then you are innocent. Case in point, and this is used in law schools for, I don't know if they still use it, but it kind of gets the point. Burglary at common law is defined as the breaking and entering of the house or the dwelling house of another with intent to commit larceny or felony therein. So let's say you're walking down the street in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and the sidewalk is right up next to a building or a house. And you are walking by and you glance in the window and you see a diamond laying on the table by the window. And the window is just open enough you can slip your finger into the bottom of the window. And all of a sudden, you have well, you have a point of weakness, and you say, wow, what an opportunity. And you stick your hand in under that window, and you push the window up just a little bit, and then slide your hand in, and you put your hand over the diamond, and then you, all of a sudden, you remember what you learned in Sunday school as a child. And you say, thou shalt not steal. He who takes what isn't his shall pay the price, or go to prison, they say. So you jerk your hand out, and you run, and you don't take the diamond. Are you guilty of burglary? And the answer is yes, because you broke and entered. You raised that window a little bit, and you entered the dwelling house of another with intent to commit larceny or a felony therein. You did it. Even though you didn't take it, you did it with intent. You broke and entered with intent, and that intent is the guilty mind. That's the mens rea, and that should be the defining point. If the act and that looks guilty is unaccompanied at the same point of time by a guilty mind, that means intent to commit that crime, then there is no crime. And that is ignored in our courts quite a bit. As a matter of fact, especially when you're dealing with the federal government tax laws. My goodness, and other laws too. There are statutes written now, criminal statutes, that omit the element of intent, and purposely, so that it will go before the jury, and then the prosecutor will say to the jury, well, it doesn't have to be intent here. Either he did it or he didn't. We don't have to prove intent. And that's what they're saying these days. And so there are a lot of people going to prison for things the legislature says are crimes by statute that may not be crimes at all. Not really. No injury. Just something that people say they want to, the legislature says they don't want people to do anymore to control the future. And then no intent, and then it becomes strict liability. That means it doesn't make any difference what your intent is. Your intent could be to do good. But then, because of strict liability, no intent required, it's a crime.
Well, now this, let me ask you about the origins of this provision. It comes out of Deuteronomy 19 and the axe head. Just quickly tell my listener what the axe head distinction is in the Bible, Brent Allen Winters.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You said that the other day. We were talking. Well, it's about the fellow that's out in the woods, and he's cutting wood for the winter with his neighbor. And they both got a couple of axes, and they're swinging their axes, and they're chopping up wood, trimming the limbs off trees. People in Tennessee ought to be able to relate to that. And I think the old translation says, and if one man fetches a blow, or fetches a stroke with his axe, and the centrifugal force, it doesn't say this, but this is what it's talking about, the centrifugal force of swinging the axe causes the axe head to fly off the helve of the handle and hits his neighbor in the head inadvertently and kills him. Is he guilty of murder? Well, of course he isn't. He didn't intend to kill him. It was purely an accident. But the dead man's family may think otherwise because there were no other witnesses. And so they may be after him. And so the Bible says that he is, if he wants to, he should flee to one of the 6 cities of refuge that the law of God establishes in the land. And as long as he's within the boundaries of that city, he can't be touched, he can't be prosecuted, he can't be arrested.
Well, the point though is, Brent Allen Winters, the point is to get to it is that if he had not hated the man in time past, the inquest would show then he did not murder him. It was an accident. And so then if there's a compensation to be paid to the survivors, it depends on whether there was carelessness involved in the mishap or whether it was just something that in God's providence happened. And there is no compensation required. But I think there probably would be. But again, it's the question is was there intent on the part of the man who killed the other man? And
I like it that you brought in that phrase, hated him in times past, did not hate him. That's important.
Right. If he didn't, it was an accident.
Yeah, that's the key to it. That's right. We have to prove intent of the mind by external objective things. We're men. We're not God. We cannot see inside the mind, but God says that we're allowed to do that, and he wants us to do it and use the jury to do so.
Well, listen, Brent Allen Winters, how can my listener get a hold of you if he has a question or wants to find out more about your work?
Well, just go to www.commonlawyer.com, David. Go to commonlawyer.com. I think we come right to the top when you type that in. And there's a contact button there, and you can go to the contact page, and you can email. And it'll get to me, and I can respond that way.
Well, Brent Allen Winters, thank you so much for joining my listener me here on the David Tulis Show at the all-new Nooga Radio 92.7. Thank you.
Thank you, David. My pleasure.
This is David Tulis. We've been chatting with Brent Allen Winters, and he is an expert in the common law. And if you go to Nooganomics.com this morning, you can find some of his remarkable, very succinct analyses explaining the difference between common law, which we are a common law state, and statute. Here in Tennessee, statute has absorbed all the common law protections. Though we are statutorily controlled, you might say, you have still always, you have your common law rights, and you can assert your common law rights to property, life, and liberty. David Tulis, brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the all-new Nooga Radio, Chattanooga's new favorite home for news and talk. That's Nooga Radio 92.5 and 95.3 HD4. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3.